Welcome back to the shop and to the channel. Well, one of the things that I've had on my project to-do list has to do with the Kearney and Trekker 2HL horizontal milling machine. I haven't moved this thing around very much once I got it and brought it into the shop. It's kind of stayed in this one spot the entire time. There's one thing I've been putting off for far too long, and I really need to take care of it, and that's really getting this machine level. As good a job as my concrete guy did, the floor in my shop isn't perfectly level, and I want to fix that. But more importantly, really, I want to fix this machine so it's stable. You might have noticed in some other videos where this machine looks like it rocks a little bit, and well, it's partially true. It actually rocks quite a bit, and I'm sure that's affecting surface finishes, at least in some way. So it's time to fix it. Well, my plan is to make some leveling feet out of this 5/8 threaded rod and make some pucks that I can sit underneath this rod out of this shaft material. If you've watched any of the other major YouTube machining channels, this is not a mystery as to how I'm going to make these. So let's just jump right into it. Well, the first thing I want to do is start making the pucks. And if this piece of material looks a little bit different than the previous shot, it's because it is. I tried to cut a piece of that off on my bandsaw, and my bandsaw wasn't having anything of it. So I suspect that that material is just entirely too hard. And if it's too hard for me to cut in my bandsaw, I can guarantee that it's going to be too hard for me to cut on this little lathe. So I found another old shaft in the scrap bin that I used for something else in the past. I don't remember what, but I obviously didn't have a hard time machining it. So I think we'll start with this piece instead of the other. Well, I want to start by cleaning off the diameter of this piece of shaft. I need about maybe 6 inches of it. I have no dimensions in mind here, so this is just going to be cleaning it up so that it's nice and straight all the way down for about 6 inches. Well, with the diameter nice and clean, now I can go ahead and cut off 4 pucks here for the feet. So I'm using my Harbor Freight 4x6 bandsaw. I wish it had a little larger capacity, but overall I really like this saw. And you can see here that it is not having any trouble cutting this material. I'm going for about 1 inch on the height of these pucks. Again, I'm not going for anything in particular. So I'm cutting these at about 1.1 inches or so, because then I can machine off the saw marks and any irregularities in the surface on the lathe. Well, that's one down. I have 3 more to cut, and then I'll take them over to the lathe to face them off. Well, with all 4 pucks now cut off on the bandsaw, I need to face them on the lathe. So I have my 6-jaw chuck in the lathe, which should give me enough purchase on each of those jaws to be sure that this little tiny piece of shaft is going to be fairly straight in the jaws, so I can go ahead and face off the front and the back. I'll put a small chamfer here on the edge, and now I can flip it over and face the other side. On one side of the puck, I'm going to use a center drill here just to put a little bit of a divot in the center. And my thought process is this is going to make it a little easier for a later machining op. I want to machine a recess in the center, and I'm thinking that it might be easier to get a tool into this little divot and cut from the center out. And of course it's not finished unless it's got a chamfer on the edge. And now I want to machine a little recess in the center of the top of the puck. And this is really just kind of to give that threaded rod a place to sit. It's probably not really all that functional, but at least as that threaded rod is turning, as I raise and lower the machine, that I am pretty confident that it's not going to leave this little recessed area. So a little blue dicom on there and some dividers gives me a circle that's a little more than 5/8 of an inch in diameter. Well, my thought was with that little divot in the center of the puck that I could reach in there with a carbide insert tool and machine it from the center out. And the truth is, it didn't really work out all that great. I was able to at least get this one machined, but the tool itself was still kind of touching the face of the puck. Um, all in all, again, it doesn't really matter for this particular application, but I do like to try to machine these things clean. And you can see here where the bottom of the tool holder was actually rubbing on the blue Dicom. So I ended up switching this out with a little tiny boring bar that I have, and I think that did a better job anyway. Well, besides those pucks, I also need 4 screws to use as the elevating feet. The 2 screws for the front are the same length, but the 2 for the rear machine are a bit longer, and they are actually different lengths themselves. Well, I have all 4 pucks machined, and then off camera, I went ahead and made 4 heavy washers. So on one end of these leveling screws, I'm going to thread on a nut, and then I'm going to weld that nut on to the end of the screw. Well, once I put the screw down through the top of the machine, I'll put a washer on, which will basically sitting underneath the machine, and another nut. And the machine will actually be sitting on top of these washers and the nut, and then that force or that weight will get transferred down into the puck, and then I can use that nut to raise and lower that corner of the machine. Well, before I weld on those nuts, I do want to clean up each end of the screw. So on the end that is going to be sitting on top of the puck, I want it nice and flat, and then just a very small chamfer on the edge so it's easier to thread on the nut. However, on the other end, I just want to put a nice heavy chamfer on it. And if the face needs cleaning up, I'll do that. But I want to put a nice heavy chamfer on this, essentially for a weld prep. When I screw on the nut, I want to have plenty of area in which weld will be able to sit and bond the two together. Well, these are all prepped and ready to go, so we'll fire up the Prime Weld MiG 180 welder and we'll get these nuts welded onto the end. Well, to keep any weld spatter from sticking onto the threads, I'm spraying everything down with some Forney anti-spatter spray. Well, admittedly, welding these nuts onto the end of these screws is complete overkill. I probably could have gotten away with just a little bit of Loctite, or I could have even just milled flats on the top of it. I mean, the purpose really is, when I am adjusting the lower nut, is I don't want the screw to spin, and so the easiest way to do that would be just to put another wrench or a socket on the top nut or some other way to keep it from turning. And this seemed like a pretty easy approach, so why not? And yes, I know I'm welding on galvanized and zinc coated materials, and welding on those materials can emit a dangerous gas which is poisonous, and the best way to avoid doing that is to not breathe that stuff in by either removing the coating, or you do what I did and open a door. Well, I've got all those nuts now welded on. I'll chuck them back up in the lathe. These are still a little bit hot here. And I just want to go ahead and machine down the weld so these look a little bit nicer. And while I'm here doing this anyway, I might as well put another chamfer back on the corner of this nut and make it look like it's supposed to be on here. Well, once I finish the other 3 screws, I'll be ready to install these on the machine and get it nice and level. Or as level as I can get it. Well, in order for me to install these and level this machine, the first thing I need to do is get it up off of the ground. And the only thing I have to work with is this little notch in the front, and there's another one in the back. Well, I've got this homemade Tommy bar here that will barely fit in here with a corner of it. And if I put a good bit of weight on the other end of it, I can get this thing a little bit in the air, at least enough to where I can slide these little pieces of plywood underneath each of the front corners. Now this will give me a little more room to get this Tommy bar underneath a little wider. I need to get it up just a little bit more so I can fit the toe jack underneath. I really only need to get it on to one side here. So I'll lift this up and I'll replace that thin piece of plywood with a thicker piece of MDF. Now I shouldn't have any problems here fitting my toe jack underneath the machine, so I can raise it up high enough to get the leveling pucks underneath. I want to get it up high enough so I can put a couple of 2x4s underneath the front edge here. That should give me enough clearance to get my hands underneath the machine and get the pucks in place. Now I'm not removing the jack here. I'm just getting these 2x4s underneath here, and it's just a safety mechanism, really, that if the jack fails and the machine were to come down while my hand was underneath the machine, it's going to fall on the 2x4s, which are right next to it, instead of crushing my hand. So they're just going to begin there temporarily while I get the feet installed. Well, the first step is to take that leveling screw with the nut welded on it and place it through the hole from the top. Now I can reach underneath and place the washer on the screw and then get the nut started. I'm threading the nut so it's all the way up against the bottom of the machine. So essentially it will be at its highest point, because I find it's easier to lower a machine with a nut like this than it is to raise it. So now I can slide the puck in so that recess is right below where the threaded rod comes out. I'll do the same thing to the other side of the front of the machine. Well, with everything sort of lined up, I can remove these safety blocks and lower the toe jack so that these threaded rods then land on the pucks, making sure everything is lined up where it needs to be, and then slowly lowering the machine, making sure that the puck is lined up in that little recess for the threaded rod. I'll do the same procedure for the two leveling feet for the back of the machine. I'm going to use this precision machinist level to help me get the machine level. But before I do that, I want to make sure that it's calibrated. And some people don't know that levels are self-calibrating, especially if you have the ability to adjust it. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to find a spot on this surface plate where the bubble indicates that it's level. And when you think about it, any flat surface is going to have at least one plane in which it actually is level. And once I find it, I kind of want to lock it into that spot. So I'm using this 2-foot camelback straight edge to sort of lock it in that plane. But I also want to lock it so the end of it is in the same spot. Now with it locked in place, I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. And if the level is calibrated, then the bubble will be in the exact same spot as it was before. Well, in this case, it's not. The bubble is off by about 1 tick mark. So I'm using a little wrench here to loosen the lock nuts that hold the level in position. And I want to raise up this right end here until it moves about a half of a tick mark, and then we'll recheck it. Well, with that adjustment made, I need to find the level plane again by, turning the level until I get that bubble right in the center and lock it in place, and then rotate it 180 degrees again. Well, it's still off just a little bit, so I need to make another adjustment. With that adjustment made, I will find that level plane again and lock it in and rotate it 180 degrees again and check the bubble. And with that bubble settling, that looks really good. So this level is now calibrated. Well, with the level now calibrated, it's just a matter of bringing it over here to the machine and adjusting those feet. So I have the level now long ways on the table, and it's just a matter of adjusting or lowering those feet on one side or the other until I get that bubble as close to the middle as I can. That looks really good, left to right. So now I'm going to rotate this thing 90 degrees so I can check the machine front to back. And it looks like the front of the machine has to come down quite a bit. Well, hard to tell from this camera angle, but that looks pretty good. But I'm sure it got the left-right levelness all whacked out. So we'll turn it again 90 degrees and recheck it and make some adjustments. I only have one of these levels, so I have no choice but to use the same one and go back and forth. So we'll have to do this a few more times until we get it dialed in. Well, that's as close as I want to get it tonight. It's not perfect, but I'm going to let this machine settle in a little bit. And then I'll come back in about a week or so and recheck it and make some more adjustments until we get it a little closer. Well, I think that's going to do it for this project and this video. It's a long time coming getting these things made in this machine level. It sits up a little bit higher, and that might actually make operating this machine a little bit more comfortable. I think these little leveling feet, pucks, whatever you want to call them, turned out really nice. I'm super happy with them. And not only do I now have a nice level machine, but it's a heck of a lot more stable. And I'm certainly hoping that the stability that I've got in this machine now will hopefully transmit into some better surface finishes. Well, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button so you get notified whenever I publish a new video. Subscriptions are free, they cost you nothing, but I would like to give a special thanks to those that are supporting the channel on Patreon or PayPal. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.